Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Velvet Buzzsaw. I'm kind of really in a artsy mood today. Like, I really needed to find a movie that I haven't reviewed and has a lot of art involved in it. Like, I really wanted to be able to find some movie where there are art ties into it because I was kind of really just going like, I really need something visual to grab me today. And immediately just like Velvet Buzzsaw kept popping up in my mind for the past I don't know how long. And so really I'm finally like, okay, like I'm feeling a very artsy like mood today. And so now I have to do this movie. Really a lot of people when it first came out, a lot of people made comparisons of this movie to Ghostbusters 2. Also, here is a movie that people may not have heard of called Dark Hearts, where if you watch that film and if you watch this film, it kind of has the same kind of approach. We have at points in time where the art does tend to pop out in points in that movie. So it's similar, and it has to do with a painter who is in such a desperation that he is to paint with blood, human blood. So I think Dark Hearts right now is available on Tubi, Tubi. Go ahead and check that out on Tubi because I have seen it. I'm probably going to review it fairly soon, as well as this. Probably on almost the same day because I've kind of almost cracked like the first 30 minutes of that movie while waiting for something to upload. So eventually I'll probably finish that today and probably review that fairly soon. So because again, I'm kind of just in an artsy mood today. Like really it wasn't something that I was like desperately trying to search because I think people like artsy movies. No, like I just so happened to just have that kind of like I was in a very creative mind space today. So this is what came out. So Velvet Buzzsaw. So this is a movie where someone's art kills someone. Funny enough, the person who was the actual artist of these paintings is dead. So the painter who is dead is killing everybody who is to see these paintings post mortem or post death. And so we also find out that this painter who had painted these things has a very dark story to him and kind of makes for a very interesting movie. And the thing that I liked about this and kind of kept chiming into my brain about I need to go back and review this because really I had seen an interview of Jake Gyllenhaal when he was to do like a comic book shop kind of video on YouTube where they were to mention like some of the current movies that had led him up to eventually doing the Mysterio Spider-Man film. And we had Jake Gyllenhaal who one of the movies that popped up was them talking about Velvet Buzzsaw, and Jake Gyllenhaal had mentioned, like, yeah, I didn't understand what this movie was. So for me, like, I wanted to go back in here, have that in mind of just going, like, yeah, this movie was kind of all over the place, but it was fun. Because really we have Jake Gyllenhaal who plays a guy named Morph. Morf, Morph. And Morph is a guy that goes on and reviews every single pieces of paintings which Rene Russo's character has. Really kind of comes in and tries to review everything and just like, yeah, like I love this, I like this, like it's a good thing that you have these. And so we start to see that Rosafina is a woman that just so happens to be working with Rene Russo, and she just so happens to stumble upon these guys' paintings because it seems that the artist who had died, had left these in a apartment building with specific instructions to destroy every single one of these paintings. And Rosafina was like, why? Like, why? Like, if anything, like, no, I'm going to make some money off these paintings. It looks like they are good enough. And so we have Josephina going and taking these to Morph, and Morph is like, oh my god, I want any bit of these paintings that you have. And so all of a sudden, that's when everybody gets a grasp of them, and that's where this thing explodes, and that's where this thing starts to jump off, as eventually, one by one, people are haunted by these paintings one way or the other, looking at them, or otherwise haunted afterwards, because eventually every single painting or every single art thing that they are going to see after this is going to try and kill them, which makes for a very interesting movie. But yeah, going into this film, I just liked this. I just liked the imagery of it. That's what kind of just sold me, of just going, I don't care if this looks like a garbage heap of a film. There's absolutely no story here and whatever. I just like the fact that we are to have a very visually interesting movie, and that's what sold me. So, with that said, check out this movie on Netflix if you already haven't. You probably already have. You're probably going on to this and this is kind of an old Netflix film. Well, I haven't reviewed this movie on this channel, so I thought it's about that time to just go in here and just get my artistry beak wetted for today. So now it's time to say it's about that time to go into spoiler times if I haven't teed this up already. Really, I like the fact that that this movie really does kind of show this high-end kind of artistry. Thank God, because I thought that this movie was probably going to be this cheaply made film. But eventually, once you go into this further, you're like, wow, it seems like they just have a ton of money to just put into this film, especially when they get to that whole sphere part. I thought that part of this movie was fairly interesting. I'm also kind of interested to see how much this movie actually costs to do. I think that is kind of one fascinating thing, to see how much this art movie had actually cost to do. And plus, I wonder if I kind of want to know the ideas of this film, how somebody came up with a thing like the sphere, or how somebody started to come up with I kind of want to hear the behind the scenes or the backstory, whoever created this. I'm kind of curious and what kind of research they did. I wonder if there would ever be a behind the scenes of this movie, to just kind of hear the creativity behind this whole thing. Because that kind of fascinates me, to kind of see how the person that created this story came up with it. It's kind of fascinating. I'm sure maybe somebody saw Ghostbusters 2. It's good idea! Because everybody made that comparison. But also, I would say definitely for people to check out the movie Dark Heart, because it's a very artistry kind of movie also. So go ahead and check that out as well. So now, if I haven't counted down already, now it's about that time to go into spoilers. So spoiler time, it's about that time we get to spoil this movie. So, There's a lot of moving parts in this movie. There's a lot of different people to talk about in this film, so I hope I get this review all correct, because there's a lot of jumbling and things going on. So, in the very beginning of this movie, we are to have Morph, who is to come into this big giant art gala, and he is to start reviewing things. And if anything, the very first thing he sees is this piece called Hobo Man. And we have Morph, who is to look at Hobo Man, and so Claudio is coming to him, who had designed Hobo Man. And so we have Claudio, who's immediately asking Morph's opinion on Hobo Man, kind of smothering him about it too. And Morph is just like, well, like, this looks just like something that someone has done before. And Claudio's like, but wait, but it's much different. And he's like, no, it's like copy and paste. It's the exact same. Like, if anything, like, it's garbage. And so eventually we'll kind of see this, like, come back around, and, like, Claudio will eventually, like, keep popping up, and this whole, like, Hobo Man thing will continue to pop up somewhere. We'll also get to know that at some point Morph's review of some person's artwork had him driven into a car accident, and now he's in a coma because of one of Morph's reviews. So I guess that's how Morph's reviews could possibly make or break a person in the art world, I guess. So pushing on here, we have Morph, who is to eventually be best friends with Josephine, and eventually start talking to her, and it seems like Josephine is having a very bad day, and Morph is trying to console her, because it seems that Morph does have a boyfriend, and at points in times, like, we can kind of really see seemingly where that relationship could be quickly like, pushed aside, because it doesn't really seem like Morph and his boyfriend are, like, legitimately connecting with one another. It seems like they're just having a good time with one another. But eventually, when Morph goes with Josephine, it seems like he is just attached to her. It's so bizarre. So we have Josephine, who is to go and start to work with Rhonda Hayes, who is Renee Russo's character, and Morph is, of course, Jake Gyllenhaal's character. So we have Josephine talking to Hayes and kind of just mentioning any excuse in the book of why that she was late or couldn't make it or this or that. There's some kind of excuse always for Josephine. And so we push on to the more important parts of this movie. And so we have Morph, who is to talk to Hayes, who's going to talk to Rondora Hayes. I want to say Hayes because I'm probably going to try to butcher their first name. So we have Morph, who's talking to Hayes, and so really Hayes is trying as much as possible to butter Morph up, to eventually kind of show him the big exhibit that they have, which is this thing called the Sphere. Evidently, this thing was like $7 million, and so eventually we eventually have people like Gretchen and people like John Don, and even Pierce, who are kind of coming into this art gallery and assessing what Hayes has, kind of questioning how much that these things were worth and how much they were probably going to sell for, because it's like an arms race to try to find the best pieces. And we have Pierce, who is a like a really struggling artist. He has like artist block right now, and so like he is just kind of watching other art and just kind of trying to figure out what could be his muse. Eventually he goes on to paint this one piece, and it just is like three colors all like kind of put in some kind of form. And we have John Don Don who is looking at it, and he's like, oh, I can see how like this could be like similar to some of your other pieces. And Pierce is like, no, it's garbage. Like I'm I'm in such a horrible writer's block right now. Like that is the garbage that I'm just producing right now. Because John Dun Don is really just buttering Pierce up because he's working with him, and really just kind of admiring some of his pieces. And Pierce is like, dude, this is all like recycled nonsense. Like if anything, like don't like come into my shop and butter me up kind of thing. So pushing on, so we have John Don Don who has this own gallery of these fairly interesting kind of pieces himself. But pushing on, so we are to have Morph and kind of Gretchen seemingly have these side conversations. We end up having Morph talking to Gretchen, and Gretchen is to mention that eventually she is to uh, transition into a different job. And Morph is like, well, good for you. Like, hey, like, great. Like, working up in the world. So we are to, let's go into the Josephine thing, because that'll really get this movie ball rolling. So we have Josephine who is to come back to or is to wake up one day to go to work, and she is to see a man lying dead in her apartment complex. This guy's name is Deese, Dease, Deese, and this is the guy that is going to become the artist of this movie. And so, like I said, we are to have Josephine, who is to know from another, I think the landlord, that this guy is getting rid of a ton of artwork. And so maybe you should go ahead and check it out, because maybe this landlord knows that this girl works with artists. So I think we end up having Josephine, who rents out this guy's apartment to check everything out. And so she is to see all of this art just plastered all over this entire house, this entire room, this entire place. So we have Josephine, who immediately takes this stuff to Morph because she realizes that it could be really valuable. And so she takes this stuff to Morph, and Morph like can't get enough of it. He's just like, oh my god, like this is like groundbreaking. It's a bunch of styles all combined together. I need to see more. And Morph is asking, okay, who is the owner of these pieces? And Josephine is like, well, I am, but it's not my art. Like, it is this guy named Deese who had died in my apartment complex, and I am just now the owner of these things. So eventually we have Josephine, who was to be let go from her job, and she was having a 90-day no compete clause in her contract. And so once Morph sends this photo and shows Hayes this style, which immediately Hayes is like, oh my god, this is amazing too. We have them having Hayes going to Josephine, and they're like, hey, Hayes is like, hey, you had a 90-day no-compete clause, so you need to take every single one of these pieces that you have found, and you need to bring them to me to sell off. because really Josephine won't know how exactly to catalog and to be able to number all these things off and everything like that, which Hayes can do for her, I guess, with a certain kind of cut. Um, but Josephine can't take these anywhere else but Hayes, so she's just kind of stuck. So we have Hayes going and taking every single one of these things out and putting it on her art show. And we immediately have Bryce, who is to, or Bryson, who is to get a taste of one of Josephine's uh, Deece arts before it is to actually go out on the art show. And Bryson is like, oh my god, like this photo, like this art speaks to me. Like, I need to see more of it. Like, are you going to sell it? I want some. So we have Josephine, who is like, dude, like you're just the janitor. Like, you're a nobody. Like, I'm not going to sell any of these to you. So pushing on. So we have them put all of this art out, and people are mesmerized by it. We have Pierce. We have an artist named Damrish, who is to be at some party where Hayes is to seal the deal on Damrish, which he is a talented artist as well. And we had Hayes that was trying to seal the deal on Damrish, coming in and bringing his art to this gallery. And so we eventually have Morph leave his boyfriend to eventually go with Josephine, because Morph, every single time that he is with Josephine, he is to get confused about what exactly he wants, because Josephine is like, well, I thought that you wanted men, and like when you're with me, it feels different. And Morph says it's like, well, when I'm with you, I get confused. And so we eventually have them, both Morph and Josephine, having a relationship together. But eventually we have Josephine, who is going to try and also like sleep her way to the top. And so she ends up seeing that Morph is kind of on his way out. And so eventually Josephine eventually goes on to get with Damrish and have a relationship with him. And because eventually the relationship with Morph and Josephine eventually just fizzles out. Because eventually she gets tired of him, especially once people start dying. She is to just start hearing Morph even criticize things like a coffin at a funeral and traditional music that they would usually play at a funeral. He is butchering the crap out of it, just saying like how awful it is, even though it's traditional like music. So pushing on to people start to dying now, because I want to get to that, because I think that's much more important. So we eventually have Bryson, who is to go on to put a lot of this art back into his truck, because Hayes is kind of worried that any of these pieces might eventually start to go missing if because there's so many of them and they're having a hard time like getting them all out and getting them all sold. So they want them to be in cold storage so nobody takes any of them, or so that way like they don't have to worry about paintings going missing because there's so many of them. So we have Bryson, who is to ship all of these things out, and so we bizarrely have Bryson, who is to go and start opening up these these Dees boxes to go and look at some of these paintings because again, this is the guy that said that these paintings speak to him. And so we have Bryson who takes one of these sketches and puts it off to the side of his passenger seat while Bryson is to go and light a cigarette. So we eventually have Bryson who is to go on and start smoking his cigarette, but eventually he starts to, while he's driving, accidentally have fall a thing of ash, which starts his clothes on fire. And so, because I think that this thing was meant for to kill people, and so this guy was lighting a cigarette, so like basically trying to kill him with his cigarette. And so we also have Bryson who is starting to see things. He is starting to look into his rear view mirror to see an old man, and so that scares the crap out of Bryson. We are to also see, I think Bryson had a man appear in the front of his road and also behind him. So I think Bryson got really, really scared, and eventually he ended up smashing into this. He ended up smashing into this, I think, like gas station or a repair place. So we have Bryson who ends up dumping uh, some of the boxes off to the side, and so Bryson's first thing to do is try to break into this place to find a sink, so that way he can water down his chest because he probably has severe burns. So while Bryson is to go and try and uh, figure out a way to heal his wounds, we have a painting of three monkeys that are right in front of him. So we all of a sudden have these monkeys who are starting to move into frame, and so all of a sudden they are starting to grab Bryson and pull him into this photo, and so Bryson is now to be killed by this painting, which actually isn't a Dees painting, but it's a painting nonetheless. So Bryson is now dead. So the next day, we eventually have Hayes, who hears word that it seems that Bryson had vanished. And so we have Hayes calling Bryson, asking him, it's like, well, hey, like, did you try to sneak away with these paintings? Are you trying to hold me up for money? Like, what are you trying to do? Like, what are you trying to do to us? So we push on, and so we are to eventually have uh, John Don Don, who is to eventually send some PI investigator out to try to find information about this guy named Dees. And so he is to get information about this artist, and so this PI is to come back to him. We also have John Don Don, who wasn't interested in hiring some assistant, but this assistant had mentioned that she works with some other artist and she has information that he can hear about right here and there. And so John Don Don is like, well, maybe there is a position open because she has secrets, she has information. So we have John Don Don, who is to hear information from this PI telling him that, yeah, like, this artist had a very disturbing and dark past. It seems that he had killed somebody at some point, and that he had a very dark past, but eventually he had gone into prison, and then eventually, after his prison sentence, he was able to get a job working for some place. But like, there's a whole bunch of darkened like stories about this character. Plus, also we get to find out that this guy was painting with his own blood. Hence why I said that this movie is kind of like Dark Heart. This guy used his actual blood in seemingly every one of these paintings, and eventually they were, after scraping some bit of it off, they had found and or realized that this guy had used his own blood in every one of his paintings. So because I think we have I think we have Jita who ends up telling Morph that information. But pushing on. So we have John Dondon who ends up hearing this whole information about Deese. And so this private eye is like, well, hey, like, did you get everything that you wanted? And John Dondon is like, sure. And if anything, you should probably go to news reporters confirming all of this the very next day, so that way, and showcase your credibility, so that way this can be out there. Just so that way, like, it could either hurt or it could either help this art increase in value or decrease in value. I'm assuming decrease. So Don Don is to go on and and eventually start to roam around his gallery, because he's all of a sudden starting to notice that things are starting to pop on that should not have. So we have Don Don who goes on to I love saying that. We have Don Don who goes on to eventually go and turn off this film projector that is showing some video. Don Don turns that off, and eventually some light bulb is to go on. And so we have Don Don who goes to try and turn off this lamp, either to rotate the bulb or something. And there's a hand that reaches out to grab Don Don's tie to choke Don Don and kill him. So eventually there is an assistant of Don Don that ends up seeing Don Don hung, as if he were to have killed himself. And so we end up having these people who are to go to his funeral, and of course Morph is to criticize every little thing that they do. Hayes is to sit next to Pierce, and we have someone who is mentioning, excuse me, Miss Hayes, like, this is for friends or for family? And Hayes is like, well, if anything, like, Don Don actually started in my gallery, so if I'm not a friend, then I don't know what is. So Hayes is talking to Pierce, and Pierce is to mention that, like, he is having artist block, and to the point to where he is starting drinking. And Hayes is like, oh, happy days. Like, good God. Like, because Hayes is, like, a really good friend to Pierce, and so eventually we have Hayes who just tells Pierce, you know what? You need to take time away. Like, you need to go off and do something for you. Like, if anything, you need to go and, like, if it's either rehab that you need, go there. But, like, you need to just go on a vacation somewhere and just relax. Like, that's what you need to do right now. And so Pierce takes that advice and goes. So we eventually have Morph and Josephine at this funeral, and so we have Damrish who sits next to Josephine, and Josephine is talking about how great that Damrish is at this funeral, and so pushing on. So Damrish is now sleeping with. Or Josephine is making her way to sleep with Damrish. It seems we keep seeing them run off to go on a date together, while while Morph realizes more and more that eventually he's going to break up with Josephine and go off to criticize Damarish's art, but also eventually to also hear the death of Gretchen. So we have Gretchen who is to go into Hayes's art gallery at one night. And so we have Gretchen who is to uh, go on and talk to her coworkers, talking about how there's certain pieces that are more important uh, than what they are trying to sell to people in her wing of art gallery or her job, whichever. And so Gretchen was talking about this horse wing and this like the JJ, and how like they could have honestly just gotten rid of both of those, because if anything, her new piece is going to be way more important than either one of those. Like she was saying, like if anything, like just get rid of them or combine them together. Who cares? Because like those pieces won't matter. So we have Gretchen who goes to Hayes's art gallery to test this sphere, this giant sphere. She puts her hand into the sphere, and this sphere will not let go. Till eventually, this sphere rips off Gretchen's arm, and she dies because of the blood loss. So we have uh, we have Josephine breaking the news to Morph, um, because Morph um, had while he was getting laser eye surgery, because he had started seeing these like moving images, they didn't make sense to him, and he'd eventually decided to get laser eye surgery, because eventually when he was uh, effing Josephine one night, he starts seeing a hand come out to him in one of these photos, and he's like, "What am I hallucinating? Like, how is it that like these pictures are like 3D coming out at me? It doesn't make any sense." To where eventually Morph has to go to get laser to get dilated and get his eyes checked, so that way he can go and be able to fix his vision. Um, so we have Morph with his eyes dilated talking to Gretchen, and like they're having an argument. And we are to have eventually Gretchen, who is to again lose her arm. And so Josephine is to tell uh, Morph about how they found Gretchen. Everybody just naturally assumed that this was some uh, like display of Gretchen dying. Like they didn't think that it was real. Like all of a sudden there was this school that came in to go and see this art gallery, and they were stepping in the blood, not realizing they thought it was some kind of gimmick or something or whatever. But eventually, when the assistant found this woman and freaked out, then they called the police. So Josephine is mentioning to, like I think she's mentioning all this to Hayes, and then eventually she is to, or I think Morph is to eventually find out through Hayes, and then Morph is to go to Josephine to try to get comfort, and that's when he finds out that Josephine and Damarish are together, and so he ends up breaking up with her. So we have Josephine, who, because of this news popping out about Gretchen dying, uh, their profits of this art gallery has now skyrocketed, because it seems that because of this death, all these pictures and all these things have gone into huge value, because I guess it's bizarrely free advertisement, bizarrely. So we go on, and so we are to have Morph eventually start to see all of these images, and he doesn't quite understand it. He is to eventually see Gretchen on a bus, and eventually he realizes that it's not Gretchen, that it's something else. So we eventually have also Morph after the news of Gretchen. He is to go to this soundproof room that is to have supposedly play these whale sounds, but instead it is to play all these kinds of things that I guess Morph has said at some point. So we have just Morph, who is just horrifically having this moment, and then he turns to the guy that was the developer of the sound room, and he's like, "What was the sounds that I was supposed to hear?" And it was just supposed to be some whale sounds. And so we have Morph that is coming to Hayes and like, "Dude, I've seen some crazy things lately, and it all has to be because of these paintings. Like, if anything, these paintings, like, there's a reason why the artist told people to destroy them, because if anything, they are going to kill people or frighten them to death. So we have to get rid of every single one of these paintings, and we have to do them now." Like, Morph goes on to get every single D's painting and try to get rid of them, and he goes into his storage. Also, in the funeral, Claudio is to talk to Jake Gyllenhaal, Morph's character, about the Hobo Man, and to mention how, like, Hobo Man is now a unsellable thing, and it's now in some storage somewhere. So we have Morph, who is going and trying to catalog and get rid of all of these things, and eventually we have him hear a sound, so Morph pops his head out to eventually see the Hobo Man there. So Morph is a little freaked out at this point, but Morph, like, consistently goes and starts looking at this Hobo Man and is like seeing, like, why is this here? What is up with this? And so we eventually start having this Hobo Man start to slowly but surely start to move. Like, starting to put one crutch onto a wall, making it difficult for Morph to move, and then eventually one crutch goes onto the wall, making it tough for Morph to move. So eventually Morph tries to get around these crutches and starts to run away from Hobo Man, and Hobo Man starts dumping his crutches off and starts to chase after Morph. And so we have Morph, who absolutely cannot get out of this storage place because he has a problem getting this this chain from this door unlocked. And so we eventually have Hobo Man, who is shoving Morph up against this cage and eventually snapping his neck and killing him. So we also have Hayes, who is to go outside to try to retrieve her dog, and eventually there is some statue that ends up falling over and almost hitting Hayes, and Hayes gets out of the way just in the nick of time. So Hayes eventually decides to start to get rid of every single one of her art things, and even as something as simple as a postcard, she gets rid of everything. But let's backpedal just a twitty bit. So, Josephine is to go out somewhere and eventually she is to go and try to retrieve her car. Sadly enough, there was somebody parking behind her, so Josephine could not get her car out. So she has to call like AAA or something to try to get this car removed so she could get out. So eventually, Josephine, while looking around, is starting to see a graffitied wall. And eventually, when Josephine is to continue talking, eventually, she is to see a spot of this graffiti that is in some art gallery. So Josephine goes in. She's going in, I guess, to avoid the cold or whatever, to avoid the outside. And so we have Josephine who is calling to anybody, mentioning that she is only out here because she's waiting to get towed. So we have Josephine who is talking to Hayes at the time, and eventually they are to. That's when Hayes realizes something is really wrong going on. Is talking to Josephine. Because Hayes talks to Josephine and mentions that Morph is going to put a review out ruining these paintings, because he is going to put out that the ghost of this Dees artist is inside these paintings and killing everyone. And so he's going to try to make that review as quickly as possible. He does. And so Josephine is angry and upset about Morph, who ended up putting these horrible reviews out of her, trying to damage her career. But while Josephine is to talk to Hayes, we slowly but surely start to see every single one of these graffiti pieces all start to drain all of their paint to eventually come to closely get to Josephine. To where all of a sudden we are starting to see all this paint seemingly appear all over Josephine's skin, to the point of her consistently getting covered with all of this paint, to the point of even covering her eyes and I guess every part of her body, I guess to eventually get some kind of paint poisoning within her body, to where eventually she is to die. So that's when Hayes just calls it like, dude, like something wrong is going on with every single one of these art people. Every single person is dying via one way or another, and I think some of these people have just been able to just kind of be able to like get out of this whole death thing, like Pierce or maybe Damrish, because we eventually have Damrish who is talking to Josephine before she is to die, and Damrish is thinking about going to a different person and put his art in some other in places, and that is when Josephine is to hear that news and is to run off to go and tell Hayes about this. So, plus Damrish doesn't really have any interest with Josephine, because of all these reviews and all this stuff, and like Damrish really realizing that Josephine is just kind of using him too. So pushing on, so Josephine's dead. Hayes is the only really one that is really left to be affected by this. So we have Hayes, who is to within her home try to get rid of every single speck of art everywhere in her home. And so Hayes is to confirm with some man that they had gotten rid of every single piece of art. And so they confirm this. So we have Hayes earlier in this film who is to talk to Damrish and to mention that it seemed that Hayes had some nickname early on in her career, which I believe was called Velvet Buzzsaw. And so I guess Hayes believed in that imagery or in that name so much that she was to attach a buzzsaw tattooed onto her arm or onto her back. What did I say? Like, I guess I was thinking like shoulder slash back. And so we have this buzzsaw that is attached to Hayes, and the buzzsaw tattoo is the thing that ends up killing Hayes in the end of this. We're to hear the sounds of a buzzsaw and Hayes being killed off, which is to lead us to the end of this movie to eventually just showcase that Pierce is on some beach somewhere drawing something out of the beach. I don't know why, but he's having a fun time. So I guess anybody that was to separate themselves from the Deece art or from these people that were to die, I guess we're safe out of all of this. So anybody who was to try to transition out of this was safe, but everybody else died. So with that said, I think I kind of in a roundabout way reviewed this film. I really do enjoy this film, just because like the visual value of this movie. It has visual value. So with that said, I am going to visually get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.